Okay.
And if you can just keep, give maybe a couple of brief examples, or or provide sort of a gem.
All right. So where I have been able to stay in touch with a client for several years afterwards, the good things are that they do survive this, that the financial problems that they thought they had, they overcome, and they have a meaningful relationship with their children. Not all of them, but, and personally, they are much the wiser. They will say that. I will have their close friends, and particularly parents, sometimes tell me, I don't know what you helped my son go through, but he's ever so much happier than I've ever seen him. And it has to do with the very simple task of learning to detach and to not respond with the learned emotions. This is off topic, but one of the things I do with some of my clients is I try to understand what are the buttons that their ex-wives push to make them react as the ex-wives want. And I say to them, well, you go home, you've got a sister or a girlfriend, role play. Have the woman come at you and accuse you as your wife used to, until it's just water off a duck's back. There's a whole bunch of techniques to learn to simply say, okay, we are going to be parents of our children until the parents die. That relationship is always there. And we'll keep it at that. The rest, who cares what she thinks, what she does? If she thinks she's winning the battle, fine. Doesn't bother me.
Oh, it's going to stop right here.
Yeah, it's just right down.
It's just a block out.
Now, at some point in time, there's a little piece of hair right at the top that it's just one piece.
I still haven't answered it right, I don't think.
Well, what I'd like to hear are examples of how they've become better fathers.
Okay. All right. One of the interesting phenomena of separation is that most fathers will say that during the relationship, because they were the primary breadwinner or both parents are working, their time with their children was routine. That after separation, they find that even though they may have less time, the quality is ever so much better. And that's a uniform comment you hear from most of these men. And over time, they become better fathers, I think. And a big part of that is learning to fundamentally respect the importance of the mother in the child's life. So they have to not just divorce legally, they have to psychologically divorce from the animosity, so that they never say negative things to their kids about their mother. And where you have children in a conflict of trust, where they go and they stay with the mother who badmouths the father, and they go to the father they hate it. So I quite quickly teach my men to appreciate that if you say nothing about the mother when that child, if you never ask a single question, that child as it grows up is going to know that yours is the neutral zone. Hers is where they have to behave different from who and what they are. And that's a draw. So just, help your child grow in that sense. Appreciate the value of the mother, and get on with your life.
Now, just very briefly going back to the assumption of primary parents, could you, in just one really brief statement, talk about how the assumption of primary parents, or the embrace of that,
right,
is a bias against fathers?
Where it used to be that kids would automatically go with mothers because of what was, that was the mother preference. It then became sort of the tender years preference. Young kids will go with mothers. And then when the courts tried to say, well, we start with no assumptions, what substituted in there was the primary parent. And so the court said, well, she's the primary parent. What does that mean? There's no cases which have ever established what that definition really means. And worse than that, no one's ever had to prove. A lawyer can go in and say, my client's the primary parent, and sit down. Now, any other type of law, if you're putting a proposition forward, you have to call evidence to support it. If you're saying, my client got injured in the car accident because that car was going 55 miles an hour, and you don't just sit down, you call forensic evidence, you call the engineer. Proves that the impact and the bent metal and all these various things, so we think 55 miles an hour. So they just say the primary parent. There is no evidence that the word primary parent has any meaning whatsoever.
Now, does it create a bias against fathers?
Oh, absolutely.
Now, if you could incorporate the question.
Okay, and this creates a bias typically against fathers.
No, when you say this, because
Okay,
we'll end
all
up
right.
serving.
The primary parent judicial rule, if I can call it that, creates huge biases against fathers in those circumstances where the father has been going out of the house and being the primary caregiver, and the mother stayed home. And of course, the funny thing is that the mother's home, she might be in the laundry all day, and the kid's over in the playroom, and there's no relationship whatsoever. Some of the most difficult cases for me to deal with emotionally are the mothers who have been out in the workforce, working in the bank, the lawyer, whatever. And there's been a deal made that the father will stay home, or maybe the father has an in-home business and looks after the kids. And then the separation, all of a sudden, the mother says, I shouldn't be a banker, I shouldn't be a lawyer, I'm going to lose my kids. And the emotional attack upon them is stunning. And I, quite frankly, have a very hard time dealing with those type of people because I don't have a quick answer for them. My tendency is to want to go and give them a big hug, and that's against the law. I can jump across the desk and give a man a hug anytime I want, but I can't go and hug a woman and say, you know, it's going to get better.
Men's groups. If we can talk about men's groups such as Fathers for Justice and what they're doing, why are they doing what they're doing, and what's your opinion about the impact that they're having?
My view, I don't have much involvement because of my time constraints now with groups or organizations or movements. I did 10 years ago for several years. I don't know what impact the shared parenting groups, grandparents' rights groups, fathers' rights groups are having. They're having some, and it's good, and I'm glad they're there. I do have a view, though, that I've sort of intimated before, that for some reason men don't have the ability to organize it right. I think one of the reasons is this. It's my experience, and I've tested it with lawyers, that the fathers who want to insist upon their children having an equal relationship with them are typically the middle and the lower class men. For some reason, the wealthier upper class capitalists don't push for this, rarely push for this. My sense is twofold. Either they're too busy for it, or they don't want to admit that it's an issue. They don't want to get out there and fight for it. There's something about that. That's a very interesting phenomenon which I would probably have to look at more before I could put more comment on it.
That's right. That point is really interesting.
Let me carry on with that point. And what that means is that there isn't the financial backing. The kind of guys I have can't go and donate $5,000 to an organization to help kids. Whereas on the women's side, there's all kinds of money from government, from wealthy women who somehow are part of the sisterhood, and that's a good thing, you know. When I see someone come along and say, "Would you give me $1 for a women's abuse center?" I'll say, "I'll give you a lot of money when you give half of it to a men's abuse center." And they'll say, "Well, first of all, they say men don't get abused," and I say, "Have a good day." I don't get into that because there's such evidence that that's not true. But
false allegations. Now,
ugh,
in talking,
you should have been here yesterday.
Can you talk about how
Let me show you something.
false allegations of sexual, because this is ending up being a real focus of the documentary, is how that is creating a further bias against fathers.
False allegation of sex abuse. This may be a longer answer than you want, but
well, you know, if you can maybe
I'll try to.
if you can stop once and fully stop once in a while.
When there was the tender years doctrine, or the mother's preference, there weren't very many allegations of sex abuse. Women didn't have to do that. They knew that they were going to get the kids. The fathers knew the mothers were going to get the kids. It was in the 60s and starting in the 70s and 80s as the court started to look more at this best interest of the child argument, and women weren't automatically getting the kids by default, that you started to see this happen, that there would be false allegations of sex abuse. You also started to see, as Richard Gardner, who was a psychiatrist who looked at this question of parental alienation syndrome, started saying, you also started seeing parental alienation coming in, because if some mothers, and it was typically mothers, although there are men now who parental alienate, as I know from a personal case they would start to do these things to get the kids. Now, there's nothing worse to a man than being accused of sexually abusing a child. Just last week, I had a very emotional client come in whose ex-common law took off with a 4-year-old child to a women's shelter. Didn't know where they were, and was served with a court document with no affidavit, nothing saying why she wanted protection. Usually you have to have the statement about an affidavit. So we go into court, and there's no allegation of anything wrong. She shows up, and my associate's there. So she sees my client, she sees her boyfriend, the father of her child, with a lawyer, and she goes off and gets a lawyer, legal aid. To get legal aid in this problem, you have to allege abuse. It's not just you have to be poor. The second criteria is you have to allege that there's abuse or risk of abuse. So the statistics on abuse are probably skyrocketing. In any event, the lawyer phones us up the very afternoon and says, my client alleges that the boy said, Daddy had me kiss his penis. Now, my guy is emotional to begin with. He's just dead. He's shocked. And it's so obvious. Oh, and in the court, he says that my associate lawyer who went there said that the sheriff's offices were all over the place. This woman has set out to get that child and to get legal aid, because she can't afford it, by lying about making up the sex abuse allegation, going to the sheriffs and pretending she's in fear of her life, having them come over and check my guy's knapsack. You never see that happen. And off in some shelter where she won't tell anybody where she is, with no history of any of this, and never put down an affidavit, always have an excuse why she doesn't have to swear to what's going on so she can't be crossed on it. Well, yesterday he went and passed a polygraph, which I always have these guys do. And where it's going to go, who knows? In my view, courts should take the custody of those children and give them to the father. Any woman who would go to that depth, and once in a rare while it happens, usually the courts sort of go, don't do it again. Shame on you. It's an awful thing to do, but we can tell you were stressed, and They'd never say that to a man. If a father said to the lawyers, my son says that his mother performs oral sex on him every day, and that was disproved, probably be a criminal charge against him for something.
Could you talk in general terms now, without referring to specific cases, about how that has created a bias against fathers, how allegations of sexual abuse have created biases? I think we've got the
I don't know that they have. That allegations of sexual abuse have accused biases against fathers?
Well, in a way, it's what you've just it's part of what you've just said about if well, that's
the general
case. But if you could just make one sort of clear statement, sort of summarizing what you've just.
Well, let me do it a different way. Maybe we work. Okay. One of the most difficult things I have is to give advice to a recently separated father as to whether he should simply, whose ex is saying you could only see our 5-year-old Wednesday afternoons, if he can keep the child for 2 days. No, legally he can. I mean, either parent is just as entitled to make a demand upon the other, no you can't, yes you can. And where women typically lay down the rule, you're not going to see this child, the judges just say, well, that's somehow their right. If I ever counseled a man to say, I picked up my child this afternoon, and the wife wants the child back tomorrow morning, and we used to talk about having 3-day trips. I said, well, keep the child for 3 days. my guy would end up being whacked by a judge as being irrational, unreasonable, causing troubles, da-da-da-da. All those adjectives would come down on him. And I've never in my life heard even one of those adjectives applied to the woman who unilaterally, completely arbitrarily, because she thinks it's right, lays down what the parenting plan is going to be. And that forces my guys to have to go to court.
Now, can you talk about that a bit, Carey, about the length of the process and how difficult that is and how it can be extended by, you know, unreasonable demands on one side or the other? Just
okay. The delays in the system are from two sources. One is the system. Right now, for instance, when you start an action, you have to wait for what's called a judicial case conference, which means you have to sit in front of a judge and explain things, and you can't do anything until that happens. And now those are sort of a month and 6 weeks in the future, and there's emergencies. So that's obstructive of, you know, causing delay. Anything that can cause delay, although I think it's overstated, is lawyers purposely delaying things. What's more typically happens is that it's very difficult, particularly if you have single lawyers who have their own practice and don't have associates in their calendars. I might want to get something into court next week, and the other lawyer's in trial or on their vacation or got something else. So you're always trying to make accommodations, and I pretty well are prepared to give some leeway, but I'll eventually just set something down. And despite screaming and yelling by the other lawyers that they can't be there, they come.
I'm going to jump back again to the question about false allegations of sexual abuse. How does that, when something like that happens, when a mother comes in and accuses her ex of sexual abuse, how could you talk about the impact that has on keeping the father away from the child? What the emotional impact is on the father, and the lengths of time? How quickly can the court remedy that?
Where there is an allegation of abuse, physical or sexual abuse, the courts, and I can understand this, and I probably don't fault it, take the position, this may be true. And they'll look at a man and say, sir, I'm sure this is going to be hell for you, but for the next X weeks or months, you're not going to see this child. I want this done, I want that done, and da-da-da-da-da. The problem is that these things that they want done sometimes can't be done fast enough, and these guys go through hell. But, you know, I think we're focusing on the wrong person here. While it is hell to the fathers, the real damage is to the kids. Because what happens is, like this example I just gave you, we've got the young 4-year-old boy who's spending the nights with his mother in a women's shelter. Who knows who else is there? There may be other women there who don't need to be there. There may be women there who need to be there, who are legitimately being abused and telling horrible stories. So this child has suddenly got a view of his father now as being at risk. Can't see father. Why can't I see my dad? Risk. And now they're being interviewed by doctors and saying, did he kiss your penis? Well, you know, wow. I mean, all this stuff happens. The kid doesn't see dad. That's where the damage comes in all this situation, is how the kids come to think of it.
That's great, thank you. And have you seen situations where dads have just had to give up because they couldn't afford it anymore? Can you talk about the cost, like the financial cost?
Yeah, the costs can be horrendous. I tell people when they come in here that there is no way I can even guesstimate the overall cost, because so much is dependent upon what the other side does. It's very, very expensive. And if you want to go to just a simple hearing, you want to go and you want to get an order that you're entitled to see your child, or the child's entitled to see you, you can spend from $3,000 to $5,000 getting ready for that and having it actually heard. No, people don't have that kind of money. Their parents go into their savings a lot. If you want to actually have a trial, you know, a year from now you haven't resolved it, you got to go to trial. You know, you can go from $30,000 to $80,000 in a 2-week trial, depending on what experts and how it turns out. And if you lose or don't get quite what you were after, you can have costs awarded against you, which is the most pernicious aspect of this whole system, where a father legitimately thinks that it's in his child's best interest to have more time with him against a controlling mother who, for the reasons I've suggested, goes to trial and doesn't get it. the system says that the loser can be, it's a discretion, can be ordered to pay costs to the winner. And that can be, I've had 2 clients in the last 3 years go bankrupt over costs being awarded against them. They're going to bankruptcy, and then no one wins. And, you know, here's where I fault the judges, big time. You should not punish a parent who legitimately is out in court trying to do what they think is best for a child. It's not like suing somebody and tying the courts up for a week on a contract where you shouldn't have been there in the first place, and it's clear you were all wrong or you were being vindictive. You know, so that happens. So it can be extremely expensive.
That's quite.
And there are, you know, we coach a lot of guys how to go and do this on their own. And there are a number of people who come in here and simply say, I can't afford it. One of the other real problems in the system is that there's nothing stopping a parent who has no order preventing them from just moving with the child across the country or way up north, or on the basis, well, I just don't like it here, I want a new job, I'm gone. So you go into court, you know, there should be a law which says, it should be part of the marriage contract, or if you have children, the deal should be neither parent has the right to remove the child that far enough away that you know, like that, without an order of the court, period.
My last question, I believe, is whether or not do you have anything else to say that you think is important?
Nope. I've shot my load.
And that's great. Thank you for that.
What happened to it? Oh, I know where it is. I'll be right back.
And when you pick up the phone, if you can make sure it's. If you pick up the phone,
Try to see how far I can get this down this way. Sort of like this. Okay. Are you still there, Rob? Yeah. I've got your polygraph results here, and you passed, as he told you. I'm going to make a set for myself and send them to the RCMP so that they will, they've indicated that upon receipt they will stop their charges or stop their investigation. The report itself says the 4 questions that you were asked, the polygraph expert says he believes that you were truthful. The first one was regarding the allegation that you sexually abused your son. Do you intend to answer truthfully each question about that? Yes. Did you ever touch Donald for your own sexual pleasure? Answer, no. Did you ever have Donald touch your penis for any sexual purpose? Answer, no. Did you ever sexually abuse police? And hopefully you can get that letter.
Yeah, if you just hang it up again. And we'll get lots of cutaways of the polygraph and stuff. So and that's probably enough. That if you can just hold the phone again, we can just get some cutaways.
Do you want me talking about anything?
You pick it up again.
Shouldn't be
and,
that good.
pick it up again as though you're start all over again, and we'll get different angles on it.
So I don't know whether the ministry wants to see this. I'll send a copy to her legal aid lawyer. I wish I could send it to Legal Aid Services because I'm sure she's used this allegation as the grounds for getting legal aid. Unfortunately, that's a whole other secret organization that we can't find out. Okay? More? stuck for things to say.
Yeah.
And anytime.
Come in. Oh, so it's not going to be picked up on the.
On picture? Well, we'll get it on picture. It just won't be the same.
My Basset always managed to chew on the better books when I have them at the house. I don't know where I can find this. Of the world's best minds and artists have made the statement in different ways. Dante in the Inferno talks about the midlife crisis this way. Midway in life's journey, I found myself in a dark wood, having lost the way. But where is his great quote? I probably can't find it now.
Well, helpful as a, can be really helpful as a transition.
Not in this book.
Okay.